Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attendance Bias. I'm your host, Brian Weinstein. Today's episode is a bonus episode. It is a recap of the Mondegreen Festival. It's about 2 weeks since the festival has been played, enough time for us to reflect, to mellow, and to consider. And I have some wonderful guests on today to share our thoughts about the festival as a whole, as well as the music within it. For regular Attendance Bias listeners, you'll notice that there aren't any sound effects, no segments, and no music interludes during this episode. It's just a conversation between four people about this awesome festival. Those four people are Skinny and JW from the Stub Me Down podcast, regular guests of Attendance Bias, and former guest Scott King, who was on a while ago to talk about the Phish show from February 22nd, 2003 in Cincinnati. So without further ado, it's a long enough conversation already. Let's get into the recap of Mondegreen. All right, everybody, welcome to the official Stub Me Down Attendance Bias crossover with special guest today, Scott King. Mondegreen recap. It's been about 2 weeks since the festival, although to me, some days it feels like it's been a year, and some days it feels like I haven't even re-entered society yet. So I think that's kind of the point of this episode, to talk it through, to get different perspectives, and perhaps to be a little therapeutic about what we just witnessed at the end of the summer. We have the Dick's Run coming up in just a few days. So before we dive into the Mondegreen recap, let's just introduce our participants today. As usual, friends of the podcast, we have Skinny from Stub Me Down. Skinny, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Hey, thanks for having us on to talk about this today, Brian.
Always, always. And Josh, how are you from Stub Me Down?
Good, buddy. Good to see you, man.
And Scott from Canada, not a podcast, but the country. How are you doing?
I'm great.
Wait,
great.
He's from Canada? You didn't tell me that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Easy, hoser.
There are a few of us there, eh?
Yeah. Yeah. I will tell you, Scott, Strange Brew is one of my absolute all-time favorite movies.
It is an all-timer. It ages well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So Mondegreen, Phish's 11th festival, was announced on January 16th of this year, 2024, in the following words on the Phish website. Quote, "We're excited to announce Mondegreen, a 4-day festival set for this August 15th to 18th at the Woodlands in Dover, Delaware. Centrally located with easy access from all points in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, the festival site will feature an abundance of on-site camping, with many nearby hotel options also available. Mondegreen will see Phish performing over 4 days and nights, alongside an array of interactive fan experiences, specially curated regional food and drink, art installations, and much more." End quote. And then the announcement went on to, just basics about the different options for lodging and stuff like that. So if you could time travel back, Scott, what was your first reaction when you heard word of Phish's 11th festival?
So my first show is Lemonwheel, and I've been to every festival but Indio since Lemonwheel, including Cyprus. So Festival Phish is where I got completely hooked. It's where I even arguably got transformed into the person that I would become. I love Festival Phish. Now, a little spoiled, Watkins Glen is a little closer to me than Dover, but pretty much immediately the wheels began to turn, and it was sort of more of a process of not a, if, but when. All I want to know is who was coming with me. The answer turned out to be no one. But not for lack of trying. I actually was really trying hard to coordinate it with the original guy that I went to Lemonwheel with. But that's just wasn't gonna work out, unfortunately. And so once I settled into the idea of what I deemed the lonely trip, I was like, nope, I can not only can I do this, but I'm going to flourish, because all I ever end up doing at shows anyway is just meeting people and talking to people. And being of a certain age, the idea of having my completely own timetable, beholden to no other group member or otherwise, became more tantalizing and tantalizing. It was just about, can I handle the 10-hour drive? I've had a really rough couple of years with a couple of concussions, but I'm back. And this was just sort of the, nope, we're doing this.
For those of you listening at home, by the way, all three of us, that would be Skinny, Josh, and myself, when Scott was talking about having the time to himself at this point of his life, we were all slowly creeping up smiles like Cheshire cats. Yeah. Josh, what was your first reaction when you heard that Phish was having their 11th festival?
And
that it was in Dover, that it was in Delaware.
I was ready to go. I think Skinny and I talked right away, like, dude, it's only like less than 2 hours away. So that was very cool for us, just the proximity. But I mean, Scott said it really well. Festival Phish is just different. And I've been to 8. This was my 8th one of these things. And there's just something about the way the setup is, the way the crowd vibe is, the way the band plays, and just the entire experience that is different from even like a 3 or a 4 night run in one location. And so I was absolutely excited. And I think after the first Phish festival I went to, which was Oswego, I basically was like, I can't ever miss one of these, because it really is this, it's its own monster. And it's kind of one of those like pinnacle things, like seeing a Halloween run or doing an MSG New Year's, right? Or going to Dick's. You got to go to a festival. And so, I mean, I was extremely excited. And I think, my reaction was not unlike pretty much anybody of the, 45,000 people that were there.
Skinny, how about you? Were you in automatically the minute that you read it and they announced it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think because of Curveball, my wife had never been to a festival before. She was so excited about Curveball, and obviously we know we don't need to rehash that tragedy. But this being so close, the Mid-Atlantic, you have to be in. I mean, I pretty much had to be in. And we did talk about that. It's right there. I mean, door to door, it's so close. And we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I mean, right in your backyard. Now, I'm not familiar so much with Dover, Delaware, more the coast, just because growing up, you go to Ocean City and Bethany and Rehoboth and that area. So you're kind of familiar with the coast of Delaware, but not Dover so much. But and I'm not a big NASCAR fan, but it was kind of cool to be out there for that. So yeah, I was definitely in.
I will add that the summer tour didn't really come anywhere around us. Skinny and I live in Maryland. There's no Meriwether. There's no Philly. There's no Jersey. So this was it as far as a regional set of shows for anybody in, essentially the Baltimore, DC area. I mean, really shit, even up to Philly, right? So that I think added a little bit of extra weight. Like I wouldn't call it a hometown festival, but these were, for some people, the only shows that they were going to catch unless they actually did some traveling for Phish this summer, which is out of character for, an East Coast summer tour for sure.
Well, I don't think it's unusual, though, that they would starve the area that they're going to plan a festival for, right? I mean, how many people, if they did play MPP, if they played 2 or 3 nights from Maryland or DC, would go there and then maybe hold back financially for time of the festival? I mean, they did that in 2011.
Maybe. I mean, they played they played Meriwether before Magna Ball. Now, obviously, Magna Ball was 5 hours away from Maryland, so that's a little bit different. But I still think, a venue like Meriwether, it's a special place for them to play. And Skinny and I have talked about this offline, online, about Phish at Meriwether prior to festivals. And we were both like, man, I know it's close, but maybe they'll throw in, a 2-night spot, maybe at like a Tuesday, Wednesday, that we might be able to get over there. But nonetheless, I just wanted to interject that about the proximity, because, that's a pretty big region that if they wanted to see Phish for 1 or 4 shows, they had to go to Delaware.
And Bethel was like the Merriweather this year, right? Like it was like that set of shows that were the quote unquote warm up shows that are always just kill.
Very good. Time. Yeah. That's a good point too, Scott.
Scott, did you see any shows on the summer tour before the festival?
No. Closest to me would have been Grand Rapids. I hadn't been there since '98 to see the band, but both dates were the night before and the day of my son's 10th birthday, which is a no-fly zone in our family. So, and not that,
same here.
Some people had, they had good times in Grand Rapids, but no, I made the right choice.
When they announced,
I was in Grand Rapids, so that's a conversation.
Yeah, but you don't have to live in Scott's house.
No, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
No, so
I think you might have been throwing a little bit of shade towards the sit-in there.
And just given the 2 experiences, I'm glad I landed on this one. And
sure.
And furthermore, like I said, the last couple of years I have not done a lot of touring. I've just been trying to put my life back together. So this was perfect.
That's awesome.
When they announced it, I was really shocked that they were going to play at the Woodlands, at the Dover Speedway or Raceway, whatever it's called. I will say that I had a bit of hesitance that lasted from about 30 seconds to maybe 2 minutes about whether or not I was going to go. And as big a Phish fan as I am, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard were playing 2 back-to-back shows in a venue, literally a 4-minute walk from my apartment door. And 2 summers ago, when I saw King Gizzard, it was the only and first time and the only time to date that I've seen them, and I knew nothing about them. It was the show of the year for me. They were absolutely incredible. So it really was about 40 seconds to 2 minutes of weighing all the infrastructure and setup of going to a Phish festival versus literally walking out the door and then taking like a 6-minute walk back. So I did hesitate, but I obviously knew the answer all along. The reason I was surprised that they were playing in Delaware at the Speedway was not because they weren't playing at Watkins Glen. I knew after Curveball that was off the table. I knew that was in the past now. But I'd been there once to the Firefly Festival, not as an attendee. I was with a friend who was doing some freelance journalism, and we got to meet Terry Crews backstage of all people.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really fun.
The actor?
Actor / body. What was he, a former football player? I think that day he was the spokesperson for Panera Bread, which is why I was there. And my friend interviewed him for 5 minutes to promote their new like strawberry walnut summer salad or whatever it is. But we got...
That shit's pretty good though.
Yeah, it is. But we got like all access passes, and that year the Killers and Eminem were headlining. So it was a pretty good festival regardless. So I'd walked the grounds before, and I knew that it was in the middle of a town on that main road. What is it, Route 13? That has everything on it. Yeah. Everything, every fast food franchise, every kind, like a Raymore and Flanagan, like anything that would be in like a town right off 95 was there. And to me, in my head at the time, Phish Festival, of all the romanticizing we're doing at the beginning of this conversation, did not match up with that kind of an area. But I suppose thinking back to the weather-related damage of Coventry and the turbidity problem of Watkins Glen, which isn't quite isolated, but it's not in a populated area either. I guess they wanted something a little bit more out of the box.
I think the infrastructure piece that they had because of Firefly and because of obviously, they have 100,000 people for, a NASCAR race there, right? They have the space for it, and they had, I think, a pretty good set. I mean, how many years was Firefly there? Like 10?
Something like that.
Something like that. So yeah. So I mean, didn't Skinny Amy went to she went to Firefly 1 or 2 years, right? So
yeah, when we first started dating, she went there, and she was pretty much familiar with the whole area. I mean, they had a Wawa and a Dunkin'. Like sometimes you need that shit. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like the Wawa, definitely.
Are you saying Limestone didn't have Limestone didn't have what you needed? Everything? Are you saying
Limestone had a wah.
Yeah, but I think honestly, I think that spot was chosen because the infrastructure in place for camping for a multi-day event. The ability to handle that. I mean, the RV lots were freaking huge, and they had people parked in the middle of the racetrack in RVs. So I just feel like, really, to your point, Brian, they were trying to eliminate, being reflective. They were not trying to eliminate being reflective. They were being reflective and trying to eliminate the problems that they had experienced with some of those other festivals. Not to say that if it had rained, it wouldn't have been muddy. Obviously, it would have, but it certainly wouldn't have created as much havoc as past rain events seem to have impacted these types of spectacles that Phish puts on.
Well, so we were all excited. It took me a little bit longer than you guys to decide that we're going. Scott, how did you plan? Like, where did you stay, on site, off site? What was your setup when you got there? And how was it getting there?
Not too bad. I had a ton of personal responsibility stuff. So my original plan was going to be to do the drive just straight, which with the border and stops and so on and so forth was going to be about 10 hours. But cooler heads prevailed, and I was permitted to leave because I was going to leave like on Thursday and just chance it, and that was the only way it was going to work with all these things. But I ended up leaving on Wednesday, driving as far as I could get Wednesday night. Eventually pulled off in Scranton, and then came into the festival site at about 10 a.m. that morning. Just not soon enough to get to the north, GA North, which would have, I think, changed my festival experience a little bit. So I was in GA South with lovingly referred to it as Gem Pop down there, but we were it was good. I mean, it's the festival experience. And again, the organization really good. Again, considering we all used to just kind of park ourselves and plot our own sites out. 10 by 30, not a lot of room, and a little bit scrambly at first, but once everybody sets in and gets into the spirit of things, nobody put up fences, maybe the odd tarp here and there. But getting in was pretty easy. Like, I'm always worried, but I'm scarred from 16 and a half hours on the highway.
Sure.
So getting in and driving in and getting to my campsite within about 35 minutes of entering into the line, that's pretty good by Phish standards. And then tight camping, but everybody settles in pretty quick, and before you know it, your neighborhood springs up, and who's what. And a lot of people got a bit of a revisionist history. They're like, oh my god, it's so long. It was a long walk to the venue, there's no doubt about that. But thinking of festivals past, like Watkins Glen, we had an RV for Magnaball. RV was way far away from the venue then. At Loring for it, I remember, I will never forget as long as I live, sprinting toward the tower for the tower jam, which was usually about a 40-minute walk. So yeah, you can be far away at a festival. It's okay, people. You just got, and the rickshaws were eventually like the biggest godsend for us, right? Like,
so you said you were GA South, so that was on the other side of the racetrack, right?
Correct. So like,
okay,
day parking, I think they put you guys like just on the other side of like the big statue.
Yeah.
We were just to the right of that. So wherever they had things closed off, and they were kind of like where you saw the cop cars there, that's basically where I entered into
okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Pod 9, close to Pod 9. And that was another nice touch too. I can't remember any other festival where they had the organized pods and sort of central sort of communal areas to at least, have meet up or get your ice or whatever may have you.
Well, that's something you brought up, something, Scott, that people started complaining about and kind of having anxiety attacks before the festival even opened, was the length, the distance that you might have to travel from one place to another. And I agree with you. I remember at it that after the set ended, I think it was the second night when they did the Tower Jam, my friends and I started walking back to our campsite, and it felt like more than a mile. It was, like you said, like a 40-minute walk, especially if you're not walking with any gusto. You were sprinting. We were just kind of walking at our regular post-show pace. I missed the whole Tower Jam because of that, because we were so far away. I didn't even know that it happened until the next day, and people started bringing it up to us. So I thought that it was a bit overblown as online chatter and complaining tends to be about the space between one spot and the other. And of course, yeah, on a map, if you walk from one end of a racetrack infrastructure platform to all the way on the other end, sure, it's enormous, but there are ways around it. I stayed with my friends, Laura and Steve. When I say, quote, my friends, they're probably who I'm speaking about throughout this conversation. They lived, or they still live, in Wilmington, Delaware. So they're about an hour north of Dover. So we treated it almost more like a 4-night run where we had to commute back and forth, but to festival grounds, not to just a venue. So we got there early each day. We got there around like 2:30 p.m. each day and spent the whole day walking around and kind of having the festival experience, but we just didn't set up tents and, ate at home before arriving. So I didn't have the traditional experience of camping at a festival. My 19-year-old self would be shocked and aghast at me. But after the festival was announced and I looked at all the different options for camping, for me, it was out, because like that night after it was announced, I got up to pee like 3 or 4 times at my apartment at home. And I thought to myself the next day, what if I were in a tent right now? What am I going to get up and find a porta potty 4 times?
Oh, there are answers to that question. Everyone had varying solutions. I won't necessarily share what mine was, but even when my wife and I are camping, we don't like to get up and wander too far. So we've come up with various solutions over the year. And that's another actually point I just want to add real quick before you guys move on, is the sheer scale of how people camp these days compared to the way we used to do it. Like I remember, like we had, like you said, Oswego earlier. Like I remember we had one blanket that we hung between 2 tents and just tried to stay alive during that heat. Now everybody's got shelter, like the setups that people have, and even myself. I have a family.
Blow up couches and
we car camp as a family, so I already got all the bins and the shelter and everything like that, and my setup looked meager compared to some other people's. So that's also a big change as well, is like you're camping, but like people have some experience in doing this, and it's it can be a really nice experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, just the invention of the pop-up tent. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It Festival, Coventry, there were no pop-up tents. We were trying to like rig together different tarps at Coventry on Thursday so we didn't get wet.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Any more than we already were. So yeah, I would imagine, but I think that's what ruined it for me, besides Boy Scouts. Ruined it, camping for me, because we camp in the winter and stuff. Like I can't. Yeah, that much time outside. I love the outside, but after a while, I need to go inside, temperature control, and have a bed. It's just, I'm old.
There's certain creature comforts, I think, that at this point I'm not willing to forego, and indoor plumbing, is one of them. And I will say this, the first 4 festivals that I went to, I only was able to successfully camp at one of them, and that was Big Cypress. And that was because we were in Florida. Oswego, like we got there late because of traffic. There was no place to set up, so we slept in the car. We tried to find a place. I was with Skinny and another friend. We tried to find a place. It was all muddy, and like the places that we kept checking, and then everything got filled up. So we ended up parking on the tarmac. I think one night I tried to sleep in the tent on the tarmac, and that was not happening. And then Coventry was obviously a fucking disaster. So 3 people slept in a car that we couldn't take anything out of. So after that, the first festival that was offering the travel package was Festival 8, and of course we're on the East Coast, that's out in California, so there's no way we could camp anyway, right? We don't have any of that gear. So as soon as that happened, and then Super Bowl happened, and then Magna Ball happened, I was like, I'm gonna sleep in a hotel and take a bus. And the great thing about this was the bus was 20 minutes door to door if everything was running smoothly, and it was great.
So you guys bought one of the travel packages.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were both at the same hotel. We were at the Hampton, which had a pool. We had a fucking pool day on Friday.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Which was great.
What was it like after the festival? Like, how did you know where to meet up when everyone was on board? Like, did you have to check in beforehand? Like, what if you wanted to stay out for a while? I've never done one of these travel packages, so that's something that I've always wondered about.
Well, I think it depends. So I don't want to jump ahead here talking about, but like even the night of the secret set, which wasn't so secret, they have buses. They are running until like 3 a.m. So you can hang out. I know that Josh and Megan hung out, but we didn't do that. We either went right to the site and then back to the hotel. Buses are always kind of chill. People are talking about the show. And I guess like for me hanging out, I'm a little bit getting tired of I'm there to like throw down for the show, and then after the show is over, I'm ready to decompress and then try to get ready for the next day. I think it's more of like the balance of it's like training. It's like CrossFit or some shit like that. I'm trying to like maintain this balance throughout so I don't get overly tired because I mean I think that's just when you've done so many of them, when you've done so many of these festivals, so many shows. Josh was talking about creature comforts. I think for me that creature comfort is I don't need, nothing good happens after midnight kind of thing. So,
It used to be after 4 a.m. It's getting
It's
earlier and
gotten
earlier.
much earlier.
I think it's like 9:30 for me now. But, so I don't adhere to the kind of, standard hanging out afterwards. I like to see people before the show, throw down at the show, and then that's a wrap.
I will say though that the day parking, the driving, it was just what we did. The first day on Thursday, it was a little off. No two people seemed to have the same answer about where to go. The signage wasn't all up. Someone would tell us to go down this not alley, but this street, this entrance. And when we would get there, the guy would ask to see our tickets or our passes. He'd say, "Oh no, this is only for Glen Coast, or this is only for the full Mond, or whatever it is." And then he'd turn us around and we'd ask him, "All right, well, where are we going?" Because I don't know. I only know that this is Glen Close. Like there wasn't a lot of communication, it seemed. And then after day one, it was just a matter of routine. So it became very easy. And for me, at least this year, and we'll get into this later, if they are to continue at this location, at least day to day seems a very strong possibility of my future festival going routine. I didn't camp and I didn't really miss camping. I'll put it that way. There wasn't that much that I felt I missed. Josh, yeah. You said you had one more thing, Josh, you wanted to say before we could move on to the next conversation piece.
Yeah, I don't remember what that was.
All right. Couldn't be that important. It's like my grandma used to say, if it's important, they'll call back.
Right. It'll come back. Yeah.
So we get on to the Dover Raceway, the Woodlands, whatever we'll call it, and the art installations and the grounds overall. Scott, what did you think of getting around the grounds overall compared to the other many festivals you've been to? Like, what was the setup of the venue?
I love the venue setup. Coming in from the south, we came in through like the quote unquote silent trees part, and right away you're there, and there's the Serialist, and so right away you know something's up, and you know there's lots to explore. I thought I wasn't sure how it was going to work with the big heliograph in the middle. But that actually turned out to be less distracting than I thought it initially was going to be. Like when you looked at the map, you're like, is that thing going to be like a distraction? Is going to be in the way? Turns out, no, it was perfect and where it needed to be. And yeah, so I loved many of the installations. You guys were talking about like, shutting it down earlier late night. I always plan on having one big night at the festival with no curfew. I was planning on it being the third night. The second night obviously changed my plans drastically. So second night ended up being my quote unquote big night, and just the ability to wander around. I love it at night, and that they kept everything open and they kept everything interesting, right? You had characters to interact with at the Serialist, and it was never, I went into the Serialist 4 times and it was never the same experience every time that I went in. Never.
That lizard guy in there was scary, dude.
He was the constant, and he was as grumpy on day one as he was on day four, but I think that was part of the character. And in fact, that serialist, like the whole finding the timekeeper thing to get into the secret sake bar, one of the dudes that I was hanging out with became super obsessed with that. And we ended up ditching him to have what I want to say is like one of my favorite installation experiences of the whole thing. Did you guys go into the portal potties?
No,
Yes,
but
I did.
Yeah, I did not. I wanted to, but what was that like? I saw pictures of it.
So imagine this. It's about 1:30 in the morning at this point. You are wandering around. It's your big night. And we've just kind of just this guy, it's me and this other friend from Canada. And the line looked relatively short. We didn't even think it was going to be open later. We had saw before that it was closed. And so we're like, what do we got to do? Let's just stand in the line and get ready to go. And so as we enter into the portal potties, immediately you're hit by that rush of air conditioning, which was a godsend, again, for us that have been out there just baking for the days. And then, it's art installation's cool. And then around the one corner, the floor is littered with beanbag chairs. And then projected on the ceiling above was this documentary. I'll call it loosely a documentary. There was clips. There was clips from Sun Ra, and there was some, I will call it sphere leftover graphics.
With like nonsensical but scientific sounding narration.
Yes. And it ended 2 minutes after we got in there, and a whole bunch of people stood up and left, and all these chairs came open, and we just were like, thud. And I could not have asked for a more conveniently timed 20 minutes of coolness, brain stimulation, end of the night. Like, it was perfection. And one of my favorite experiences of all the art installations there. And the moon. Did you guys get to the moon?
Yeah, the moon was pretty sweet, dude.
Yeah, the moon was pretty awesome.
The moon at night was even cooler than the moon during the day, because my experience with both of those, all three of those installations were right next to each other, right? The Serialist, the moon, and then what was it called? The porta potty?
Yeah, the portal potties.
Portal potties, right, of course, in the Mondegreen fashion. Me and my friends did all three of those in a row on Thursday, right when we got to the grounds, because we got there Thursday at like 2 p.m. There was not that big of a crowd. People were still setting up camp. So the Surrealist was very fun and very strange, seeing that cotton candy mummy being like created in real time. That was so weird.
So weird.
And I felt so bad for whoever it was, because it was rotating, always guys that I saw just getting smothered in cotton candy, and they didn't seem like they were allowed to blink or move. And they were in kind of stressed positions, like they were sitting up with their hands away from their chests. But like, if you try and hold that position for more than 2 minutes, at least someone in as bad shape as me, I'll start stressing, I'll start aching. He was doing it for like at least 20 minutes that I was watching, because I was stimulated by this, but being shot at by a cotton candy machine.
Well, and I will say this, over 4 days, I found something every day new. Yeah. Right. Like I went to Leaf Fordham on the Saturday, and that was a whole new experience. I didn't end up getting to Farmhouse until the last day. So there was always like, they knocked it out of the park in that if you were there for all 4 days and on site for all 4 days, there was still new things to find and do 4 days in. So bravo for them on that.
I went to the Leaf Fordham tent. I think it was the third day. I can't remember exactly. And there was a stand-up comedian. His name escapes me. And I felt so bad, because a Phish crowd is probably the worst audience to have a stand-up comedian. It really is, because
it's got to be horrible.
It's got to be horrible, right? We're four guys with microphones, and I'm about to say, not everyone needs to hear your comments. Yeah. At a stand-up comedy show, you just keep your trap shut unless you're on stage. You let the performer perform, but everyone had to shout out and interrupt him. So it was almost like the 25 minutes that I was there was almost like 25 minutes of trying to address hecklers politely. And it was very awkward and uncomfortable for me, but it was air conditioned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could feel that breeze when you just walk by the entrance. We popped our head into Leaf Fordham one day, but there was nothing going on. I mean, Mike Gordon went and did like a stand-up set or whatever, which I never saw like any video of. I just saw a couple of pictures of him on stage. So I don't know if anything he said was funny, but to Scott's point, like around every corner there was something new, something cool, something different to explore. Whether it was art or whether it was something, some sort of concession or something that was cool. I mean, we walked around the farmhouse and just like we didn't get anything, but we just like took a look, and it was like the broccoli bar. Like there was just some crazy, like the pizza looked really good. They really do a nice job, I think. Or and I would think Magna Ball also kind of set a little bit of that stage. Like everywhere you looked in Magna Ball, I felt like there was like an art installation. Like Skinny, remember when we walked in and there was like the pipe that had like the fake dripping stuff. So like all these little cool, like,
and
you
the
might
big
not
ears with the giant Q-tips, right?
Yeah, like
right.
stuff you might,
Mhm.
You'll notice, but like if you're not like walking around looking, like there are things you could definitely miss, especially like that was a huge concert grounds, and so I think it was cool how they kind of tucked in some things here and there, but then also had these larger exhibits. The Museum of the Moon was probably my favorite. Like we spent a little bit of time there after the show one night, and like it was almost weird. Like nobody was really talking in there, so it was kind of like it like took a step like into that, and it there was like a void of noise, so it was kind
The
of
moon
like
doesn't have an atmosphere, bro. So there's
yeah.
no.
So
no.
and same with the people there. Like everybody was like,
Oh, they have atmosphere.
but and then as far as the heliograph, we tried to get up there on Sunday during Questlove's set, but the line was a little bit too long, and then he started doing like a Night Rider mix. So I was like, fuck that, I'm gonna stay down here and
Yeah. I was really impressed with the City Hall.
Oh yeah.
I thought
Oh,
that
yeah.
was unbelievable. And
Did you get inside before they didn't let people inside?
I did not, but I saw them raise it. I saw them
Okay,
constructing
cool.
it the first day, I think it was. And then the second day, they had all the ropes tied around it and they did a big count off. It was really like, I don't know, maybe a 1600s shipbuilding or like an Amish barn raising or something. And everyone just, one guy shouting out directions and four different groups of people in four different directions with their arms wrapped around these white ropes. Pull! And they all did it. And the whole building just lifted up and then settled back in one piece. And it stood like, if you looked real quick out of the corner of your eye, you could really think that this was a structure with integrity, like that it was really a building. And it was modeled, I found out after Baltimore City Hall, if I'm
Yeah.
right about that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it was right. Yeah, right there on the sign, and I thought that was like, that was pretty cool from somebody born and bred in Baltimore. I was like, wow, how life is a flat circle. I always say, that's crazy as shit that was Baltimore. I had no idea until I walked over there.
And looking at it at night during the shows for at least the first two nights before they took it down, it was like seeing a show on the mall in DC and you're just glancing over at the Capitol. It just had that, just like the moon installation was outsized. That was also kind of outsized because it was really close to me, but because of its dimensions, it looked like it was a real building farther away.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I loved about the venue site too is like almost no matter where you stood, but in particular one night we were just to the right of the heliosphere, to the left of the Ferris wheel, but just the full circle of when you looked around from the stage to the trees, back over here City Hall, over here's the Ferris wheel, like it really, you just felt like you were full circle immersed in something that was like a bigger world. They did such a good job of that.
And it was so great to have so many landmarks to be able to meet up with people.
Yeah. Well, and they labeled the speaker towers too, which was also very helpful.
Yes.
Oh man, I didn't even catch on to that.
I did. I was by speaker 6 for most of the nights.
Nice.
Well, speaking of the speakers, let's take a pivot and talk about some of the music. So, overall impressions, I thought that a lot of the really good jams were mirrored, or that they did mirror the best jams of the summer. This was a really strong summer tour. I can't imagine any of the three of you would take an opposite position. I think from what I've spoken to of different fans and just monitored online conversation and taken part in online conversation, if that's a barometer of the overall Phish community opinion, at least, that this was one of the better summer tours of recent years, certainly since 2021. I would say since 2015. I think this was a really strong tour in that, if not every single show, at least every single run, you could leave saying, I got my money's worth. And if I weren't seeing another show this tour, that's good enough. You know, if you avoid the addict part of being a Phish fan, at least, you know, the isolated satisfaction part of it, I was happy with that show. I think you could say that at least once at every stop on this tour. Let's see, Josh, what shows I saw you at a couple shows, right? We saw each other at Mohegan Sun. I was only at Mohegan Sun. It was those shows and then the festival.
Yeah.
What shows did you see this summer before Mondegreen?
So we did night 2 and 3 of Mansfield, and we did both nights of Mohegan Sun and both nights of Grand Rapids. So we had a little bit of the beginning of the tour. Grand Rapids was kind of right in the middle there, and then obviously Mondegreen towards the end. So it was. I loved every show that we were at. Of course, as most people know, my favorite show was the one I'm at. So, you know, in those moments, I was having a great time. But, you know, even the re-listenability of all those shows, even if every song is not something that you might dig, everything was very well played. They had some long stretched out jams. You know, I 100% agree with your sentiment that this tour, I think, was very solid from the beginning. You know, they didn't really need a whole lot of time to get warmed up like they have in years past. So coming into Mondegreen, like, I mean, as Scott said, the Bethel shows right before the immediate preceding shows were very good. Like obviously the Billy Strings sit-ins were, if you want to call it quote unquote controversial, right? And those would probably be considered the worst shows of a 23 show tour, right? And that's because it wasn't all Phish. I mean, we can talk, that's a conversation for another day, but the fact that that's what it took for those shows to be, you know, not as well received as some of the other shows they played, you know, whatever. But I think coming into this, like, the feeling was like everything that they touch is going to be great. I mean, My Friend turned into a vehicle this summer, Kill Devil Falls. You know, you had a couple of good Sense and Subtle Sounds, including one here. So I feel like there was a lot of positive energy about where the band was. Like, I didn't really see a lot of griping, you know, coming into this either, you know. And then you get that idea of like Festival Phish, they have this stretched out thing, so like it's not going to suck at all. Like, it's going to be a pinnacle, you know.
Scott, what shows did you see, if any, before the festival? You said you didn't, right? Actually,
no, but you know, obsessive listener, obsessive tracker, my Road to Mondegreen playlist was full and perfect. And you know, so much has been said this summer about the telepathy factor, the democracy factor, like just the ability to get jams off the ground in bars, not minutes, right? Their ability to just sort of lock in at this point, to the point where, like, you know, the more conspiracy minded self I have is like, I feel like they're transitioning so well. I almost feel like Trey's got a pedal where he just pushes in. It's like a yellow light. We're getting ready to go in a green light. They're coming in and out of songs so fast. And I know it's the answer's not that simple, but you know, it's good. It's magical that way. And so anything could have gone. We all had our predictions about what was going to go and what was going to go big, and everybody drew up 4 different nights of sets in their brains. But man, like, what you got was just some absolute powerhouse selections, especially once the decision was made to sort of, like, you know, nix the 4th night, which really put so many heavy hitters into the 3rd night. But overall, I left filled to the brim, knowing that I saw 24 Phish. It's always a big thing. Like, did you see 21 Phish? Did you see 23 Phish? Did you see 97 Phish? Whatever. I got my snapshot of 24 Phish perfectly with everything that I saw at this festival.
I agree. A snapshot is a good way to put it. But before we get to night, Skinny, what shows, if any, did you see this summer before Mondegreen? And if you didn't see any, what was your impression of Phish in 2024?
So I didn't see any, and this was it. So we knew going into the summer we were only going to see these 4 shows, which actually turned out to be 3. But again, I'll talk about that later. But my impression is kind of right where Scott's at, which is they have this ability to do these. Josh and I were calling it type 3 jams, and I noticed that last year in Nashville. It's not a thing, but maybe I'm trying to make it a thing where it's this jam that goes out from wherever they are, and then there's another jam after that brings them back to the original part of the song, or it fades out, or they seg into something else. And I'm impressed by their ability to do that. Saturday night for me, and Friday night, actually, really, they showed their chops of what they were doing. So I did too. I got a pretty good snapshot. And I was listening because Josh was going to those shows, and I was listening to a lot of it once it got up on re-listen and listening into the car. And I really liked what they were doing. I thought I guess strong is a limited vocabulary word, but I mean,
well, we're limited men.
Well, certainly I am, but I that's all I can't, like, it's hard to come up with an analogy a lot of times, especially when you've been seeing them for so long, and people have been seeing them longer than I have, but very, very strong and a lot of fun. I mean, definitely a lot of fun.
I will say, and maybe we can just throw this out there and toss it around and then kick it to the side. The big complaint, I don't even know if it was big, but I did see a couple of times on Twitter and in one online forum that I participate in, the reaction of they didn't do any Mondegreen lyric covers. They didn't have any 30-minute jams aside from the secret set. And then there was like one other thing that was supposed to be, like a knock on how they were playing, what they were playing, and I guess maybe in comparison to festivals in the past. And I looked at all of these songs, and yeah, there was no, I think 25 minutes was probably the longest thing that they played, aside from the secret set, right? And they had a 40-minute over the summer, a 40-minute simple. They had a 30-minute tweezer. They had some really big jams.
And the Chocolate Torture in Mexico.
Yep, right. They had some really huge, and not just long. Skinny and I've talked on Stub Me Down a lot of times about length doesn't always necessarily equate to
the quality,
right? What we got here, yeah, sure, there were no 30-minute jams, but I felt like every single note they played was so full of intent. And even like some of the shorter jams, and obviously we'll get into the set, but like even some of this, like the simple was short on Sunday, but every single note they played in that simple felt right, felt intentional, and felt festival like. And because the set lists, I think, were so strong, in my opinion, it didn't matter if a song was 12 minutes or if they got it up to, 20, or maybe they bounced around and there weren't a lot of like 8, 9, like they were kind of in their comfort zone. I feel like from 12 to like 16 minutes with a couple of in the neighborhood of 20 jams. But like the fact that they didn't have any of those super long jams that maybe festivals are known for, I think is an overstatement of the quality of what they actually played, because the 20-minute jams that they were playing were just amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott.
That's okay. Like if you take, for example, the simple from Alpine this year, right? That kind of thing is driven not just by the band and their intent and purpose, but by that intangible that takes over from a crowd like Alpine that drives you into the 25th, 30th, 35th minute, right?
Right.
You or the AC/DC bag from Bethel. That's that intangible of a smaller, more intent crowd that's just getting up underneath the band and pushing. Whereas festival energy, the band is matching 45,000 people that are stoked every single second that they are there. So there's none of that sort of like big ripple energy. It is a sustained, intense, devoted energy that, oftentimes you can even miss it when you're in the crowd. If you get too far back or like, somebody gets off wandering, you can lose yourself, but the band is just there feeding off of everybody that's just right there in front of them. And so I think the sets and the jams reflect that focus, but also a consistent intensity that you really can't even imagine unless your boots on the ground there.
Yeah.
I agree. It felt kind of spread out. There were so many people, and the festival grounds were so wide that it really felt like you could just go anywhere or be anywhere and feel the same way, as opposed to, let's say, Mohegan Sun, which is a 10,000 seat arena, like a lot smaller concentration of energy. Ironically, to JW's point, they didn't have any of those extraordinarily long, tentpole jams of the tour at Mohegan specifically, but that idea of it being a concentrated ball of energy as opposed to a spread out kind of wave of energy that sticks around for a long time. 4 nights, by the way, this is the first time they've ever done a 4-night festival. So, or 3 nights in a day, it turns out. It's a different energy. So I'm with you, JW, in like rejecting that as a criticism.
Yeah.
They didn't have any extremely long jams. I do wish that they played a little bit more into the Mondegreen theme, even though it wasn't a theme. It was just the name of the festival. But I got over complaining about lack of gimmicks a long time ago. I love gimmicks. It's maybe my favorite kind of show, like narration and gimmicks. I am all in for it. Give me a Tweezer Fest, give me a Forbins, all that. But the lack of it doesn't work against the show for me, even though in this case, though, it's the title of the festival. But let's take a look at the music itself. And just for the sake of brevity, let's all, if we could, just list one highlight per show and why we loved it and just go from there. I'm sure everyone listening to this has either listened to the festival or is intending to do so. For the first night, I did like the second set opener, What's Going Through Your Mind. That's like my immediate highlight. But when I listened back to the whole show, I'm going to give a little bit of a surprise answer. I think my favorite performance of the first night was the Wolfman's Brother from set 1. It was funky. It was tight. It was hard. It was extended. And a lot of people, it was like, to me personally, it really gave me the sense, okay, we're actually here for the festival. The festival is now. It's not just something where checking off a packing list. It's not something that people are jabbering about in Facebook groups. It's something that is happening in real time. And the Wolfman's Brother is what took me out of myself and let me live in the moment. I love the Wolfman's Brother from this first set. It's the one that I skip back and re-listen to over and over again, more so than the What's Going Through Your Mind that opened set 2.
Yeah, I love that. I would have to say, What's Going Through Your Mind, I have on a continuous loop right now. And it's because behind the second time that they played the song, this was one of the longer jams of the weekend. And boy, they really did a number on me with that song. I hadn't even heard it, but I was so locked into it as a second set opener. That to me was almost gaggy for me. Like, it's the second time they're playing it. I've never heard. I just know that they played it. Where did they play it? In Grand Rapids?
Yeah, with Billy Strings. Yeah,
right. And then, but I never listened to it. This is like I haven't listened to those Grand Rapids shows at all. And then I'm hearing this, live and in person, and I don't really chase anything anymore. But I guess now I'm playing the opposite game where it's chasing me a little bit, and they did that with me with this, and just the fact that you can actually hear Trey when they're going mine, mine, mine. He's like laughing at it, but it's not like it is funny to hear them say that or sing that in harmony and Trey go. and do that, and you can kind of hear the fun that he's having with. So they kind of flipped the script on me. I wasn't chasing anything, and then I got this, and it's like they're chasing me. That's what I really like that song. I've listened to it a lot, and that the jam afterwards is just money.
Scott, before I ask you your highlight of night one, I do want to chime in on that one part of that song, Skinny, about the mind. And this might be an unpopular opinion, whether
Ryan
between the
hates it.
four of us. No, that's not what I'm going to say. Between the four of us or through any listeners. But to me, it sounds like it could have been a Billy Joel song from the Nylon Curtain. It really has that vocal. I know Tom Marshall wrote the lyrics, and it's more of a storytelling angle. It tells the story, mentioning people, as if the narrator knows who they are, but we as the audience just have to take it for granted by their name, like Jennifer or whatever the names are. Billy Joel used to do that a lot. And hearing Trey come on stage with Billy Joel a few months ago at MSG, they played songs from the Nylon Curtain, like a specific album of Billy Joel's. And to me, maybe it's because I'm a born and bred Long Islander, that's where my head went. And if that's where the future of Phish songwriting is, as opposed to, as you guys taught me, the Church of Trey in the first part of 3.0, I'm all for it. I am in. Give me more of what goes on in your mind. What is it called? What goes through your mind? What's going through your mind? Tom Marshall, give me more of that.
So I won't tell the whole story, but I on the way out of Grand Rapids, we ran into Tom Marshall in the airport, and he was sitting by himself. And I was like, I got to go say hi, because we had seen him the night before, and I didn't really get a chance to, chat him up. He was with a bunch of people, but I went up to him and I was like, hey, great to see you. Great show last night. And, we got to talking, and we were talking about the show, and Billy String's sitting in, and he was like, yeah, he's like, it was really weird to hear a kid sing lyrics to a song that had never been played. Trey had played it once with Trey Band, I think last spring. And he was like, to hear, this kid, he's like, what, Billy Strings is, however old, 27, 28 years old or something. He's like, to hear him sing these lyrics that were written before he was born was really surreal. And I texted him after they played there, I guess it was the next day, and I was like, oh man, that went really deep. And he was like, it was so awesome. So I think that how many songs do they have like that? And to Skinny's point before about not chasing anything, we've seen a lot of shows, right? So you're not necessarily, maybe you're chasing Take the A Train or a Proud Mary cover or something like that, right? A lot of people want them to play Whipping Post, right? But when you get debuts like this, and it's not the new song off the new album, it's a song that was written 30 years ago, and they're just now breaking it out and playing it, there's something so special about seeing that, and then to see it in this position. And like Skinny said, it really did go deep, and that is absolutely one of my top musical highlights from the four nights. And it was only the first song of the second set, but that's not what I'll talk about. I'll let Scott go, and then I'll talk about me.
Okay.
I think you're getting another turn.
No, I was just telling the Tom Marshall story.
Scott, what was your highlight on night one?
I'm ready to kind of use my skip turn button, because I know it's just more of the same. You got both of mine, the Wolfman's, the What's Going On Through Your Mind. Night one, I still think on playback is my start to finish, my favorite night of all the nights. Just construction, flow, it's got it all. And the What's Going On Through Your Mind, like you say, it's one of those songs. It's not to say they're not all good songs. I'm looking at you, Rise Come Together, but it sometimes, right? You're waiting for the jam. I'm not waiting for the jam in this one. I like the song, and the bonus was I got an amazing jam to go with it.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
So I'll just throw this out real quick, but at the end of the first set, they did Wave of Hope, Sand to close the first set, and they were both in the 15-minute mark. But that Sand, was fucking spectacular. And a lot of people won't like look at it and be like, oh, the sand. But I mean, it was 15 minutes. It was, much longer than the 8-9 minute kind of really first set filler that it's kind of settled into. There's definitely been some bigger ones. They played a 34-minute one. Where's that, Alpine last summer? Maybe Deer Creek, one of those places out in the Midwest. So it's there. It still gets a ride, but most of the time you're going to see an 8-9 minute, nice little jam in the middle, but it sound, a lot of them kind of sound the same. This had a little bit of a 1.0 feel. Mike's bass really was carrying,
all
especially
weekend.
I want to talk about Mike's bass in general, but yeah, go ahead.
But I mean, that
MVP.
If you go back to 1.0 Sands, specifically, I think the GOAT is Big Cypress. And the one thing that you carry out of that is like Mike's just absolute steady, droning, driving bass. And that felt a little echoed in this version. And then Trey and Page had some really nice interplay, like the last 4 minutes. It peaked out really nicely. The other thing was, like, after they finished Wave of Hope, I feel like there was kind of like an air around us that was the end of the set. Mm-hmm. And then boom, they dropped those first couple of bass notes, and Sand is my favorite tune. My wife like looked at me and she's like, holy shit. Like, we were with our whole crew and I was just like, we're at a festival. This is the fucking best. They're playing my favorite song. My favorite people are here. And I mean, that just I really like this set list overall. And Scott said this might be his show of the 4. This is it's in consideration because especially that segment, and then what's going through your mind into, the second set was just the flow was just strong, very strong.
Yeah, that segment is the first time, like, I was with various groups throughout the weekend, but the people I hooked up with for first set weren't getting down hard enough or near enough. And during the Ruby Waves is the first time I did my first takeoff, and I got to get closer. I got to get more in the mix and dance my butt off for the end of that first set. Totally in concurrence.
Yeah. Now, I will say before we move on to night 2, Prince Caspian here, which obviously it's shit fucker pants, and it is what it is. But the Magnaball version, very, very good. And this version I feel like was pretty good too. I mean, this was almost 15 minutes too. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Another solid festival Prince Caspian, even though Caspian is arguably not necessarily on anybody's top 10 list.
Very diplomatic of you to put it that way. So night 2, my highlight was, in a way, I could cheap out and say the whole second set, but really it was the Ruby Waves into Pillow Jets, Your Pet Cat back into Ruby Waves. And for 2 reasons. Number one, for the social reason, I was with about 17 or 18 people who I've been part of a Phish message board for over 20 years now. And this was kind of like a big get together, a big family reunion in a way. And we hung out together for this pretty much the entire show. And everyone was just deep feeling it. It's like starts with the 4th or 5th song in the second set. We're all peaking both within and without ourselves. And the jamming is incredible. And this is what stuck with me during the sequence of Ruby Waves throughout back into Ruby Waves. Musically, the reason I love this summer so much, and I think, Scott, you mentioned this, that the way you phrased it, I think, if I'm getting you right, is that you think you get the feeling that Trey has a pedal that has like a yellow light almost like a stoplight to indicate they're going back. And I realized during this part of the second set, they keep landing the jams. They don't just fizzle out. There's no rip chords. They don't sloppily transition from one song to the next. Trey doesn't just always start playing backwards down the number line all of a sudden for no reason. Like, they had the presence of mind, collective mind, to end a song, like segue back into it, or to segue into another song cleanly. And a favorite era of Phish of mine, when I was first getting into the band, I was obsessed with 1993 through 1995, when they were basically telepathic and they could weave in and out of a set list it sounded like effortlessly. Of course, it was the result of hours and hours of practice, but as an audience member, it seemed just like they were magicians. And this summer kind of felt like a return to that. And it brought out the same feeling as 14 and 15-year-old me collecting tapes. But instead now I'm in my 40s in 2024. And that was my favorite part in the second set, the whole Ruby Waves, Pillow Jets, Your Pet Cat, back into Ruby Waves. I know it's not a song, but it's a sequence that really brought the best out of me. Scott, what was your favorite part of night 2?
Certainly second set I got a lot to say about. Before we get to that, Kill Devil Falls batting 1,000 in 24.
Oh my God, yeah.
Like,
shit.
no longer just the I used to call it Chalk Dust Light. It's like, we need Chalk Dust, but we played it last night, so Chalk Dust Light. Let's bring in Kill Devil.
That's better.
like
when it was when it
I
debuted.
really like that,
I was at
actually.
its debut at Jones Beach, and people then were calling it Phish's Alabama Getaway, which is much worse than calling it Chalk Dust Light. Sorry,
But
keep going.
the jams they're cultivating from Kill Devil right now are great. And in the same vein as, like, you get to the end of the Chalk Dust, it's not like Chalk Dust anymore, but it's, like I said, batting 1,000. So when I heard Kill Devil Falls in the 2 slot in set 1, I'm like, yes, this is something I'm chasing this summer, something off the checklist. The Segway Fest in set 2 was amazing. Like I said earlier in the podcast, night 2 became my big night. And so, preparing accordingly. And then when they announced that there was going to be the secret set, it amped up again and precautions were taken. My only knock was I was maybe over precautioned by the time the pet cat samples came in. Were they loud for you guys? Was that just me in the moment? I was
they were really loud.
Yeah, that got inside my brain in a weird way, but just so much fun. I just didn't stop moving the entire set, and was actually kind of funny because we were back a little bit, but with good crew having a good time. And we were also right beside this group that was all dressed completely like Pokemon characters. And as we started drifting slowly closer and closer, we realized it was the Anastasio sisters and their posse. And you know how during a show you don't intentionally, but all of a sudden groups just start merging and so we ended up in their mix, which was just kind of a hilarious, surreal moment. At Pillow Jets, my first Pillow Jets, so I was really happy to get that off the checklist. I really wanted to see some of the new stuff. I wanted Big Oblivion, I wanted a big Pillow Jets. Didn't get my life-saving gun, but it's, we got to chase something, right? So it's out there as well, and I think we'll probably talk separately about the Woodlands Jam. So
yeah
Curtain Jam, you mean?
The not so secret jam is what I'm calling it.
Yeah.
Josh, what was your highlight of night 2?
Scott stole my thunder on the Kill Devil Falls, but I did have a second one because I'm me. Look, that whole set, my friend, No Men's, Ruby Waves, that whole segment was absurd. I loved the Fluffhead. I
almost forgot about that.
Festival Fluffhead is it just hits different, and standing there, Fluffhead for a while, that was the song they fucked up, at the end of 2.0 and then started the whole 3.0 thing with Fluffhead. And I think there's a certain segment of fans maybe that Fluffhead is that, like, you always chase a Fluffhead. I've seen Fluffhead a lot, but I will always chase a Fluffhead because it holds that place in kind of the Phish lore. And
well, it's symbolic because they didn't play it at all in 2.0. And the story is that when Trey went up to the mic and said, Mike says no, it was because the crowd up front was chanting for Fluffhead. Right. Because Phish hadn't played it since they had returned.
Right.
So the fact that they never played it in 2.0, which is pointed that they opened with it at Hampton,
right,
makes it, I agree with you, it has a special place in Phish lore.
Yeah. Plus, they stretched it out. There was a little bit of a jam in there. It was almost, I think, a 20-minute version. And
the white lights.
Yeah. And, you're just standing there and the whole fucking crowd, 43 people, start chanting Fluff Head, and it's just it's a release, it's a peak, and coupled with the festival vibes, and then you throw in the fluffhead vibes, it just that was just so fucking cool. That was a spectacular moment for me. And I'm with Christian and my wife and his wife and our friends, and there was just something so special and magical about that moment, and with the people that we were with and where we were. It just all hit right.
Christian, take us home on your highlight of night 2.
So everybody stole my thunder. So
this will be quick.
This will be quick. I love the Dagwood sandwich in the second set. And just as a funny aside, I guess I preemptively made a mistake and tweeted out "fuck Alpine 2019 Ruby Waves." I got no likes. It's fine. But
that's a hasty take. Yeah,
it was a hasty take. But in the moment, I was like, dude, I can't believe then they, the fact that they go back to it after the Your Pet Cat, and then a quick ghost, and then back into the No Man's, just this, they just keep doing that, and then they keep it all nested in that sandwich. It's just so cool. I was like, I think I saw them do that. They did that with a disease in Atlantic City a year or two ago. And, when they do those things, again, they're chasing me. I'm like, I've never seen it. And I got my first Pillow Jets. I really wanted to hear that song. And I really love that second set. I will say, though, the Reba and the timing of the Reba, based on just the environment outside and the moon over on the right side by the Ferris wheel, and the breeze started to pick up a little bit, and it was almost like Reba brought that breeze.
It always does.
Yeah, it was really, it like kind of cooled everybody out, and really left it open for, a slamming second set. I love this show too. I've been listening to this a lot lately in my car as well.
Well, since we're going chronologically and everyone stole your thunder, Skinny, what were your thoughts on the secret set?
I thought it was so cool. I was trying to put myself into perspective. I didn't know it was happening at first. And then I heard guitar. I actually thought it was set break music, just chilling and waiting for them to set up for the secret set. And then they kind of had like the ribbons that they had from like New Year's Eve with the Mercury set where they lifted off stage. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And they started showing like the leaves turning into flowers, and then the flowers turning into pine trees. And it was like, I was trying to put myself into this space where, is this like kind of things that they saw on their journeys? Because there were like ribbons of roads kind of going through that. And the jamming started to pick up in intensity. And it wasn't like an ambient jam. I mean, it was at first because I didn't know what was going on. And then it became very, very clear that obviously they're behind this curtain, kind of like Magnaball. They're behind this area. And the jamming turned into almost like they were picking up where they left off in the second set. So, ambient, sometimes it's like cool to watch and get the feel for it, but there's like kind of nothing you can do except stand there and just be in awe, right? But there was a part towards the end of the secret set where, I mean, the jamming was intense, like it was in the segs all through that second set, being sandwiched. And I was like, God, man, they are really just driving. I thought it was probably musically for me the best like jamming I've seen, just because I felt like it put some hooks into me, where ambience doesn't really do that. You're just like, whoa, that's cool. There's like, it looks like fire, or
yeah, it's like soundscapes, right?
Yeah, it looks like an ocean or whatever. And I'm not necessarily too into that, because then I'm going to start getting tired. And then it just picked up in intensity. There was this thing where, the last thing I'll say is like, there was this huge like stag, like a 10-point buck that they kept showing like in this woodland area. And I was like, I really feel like they saw that or something on a tour bus. It just made me think like, these are things that they saw outside of their window all these years. whether they were on tour or driving to festivals, whatever that mechanism is. And then lastly, too, I thought it was like, okay, they took some of the technology from the Sphere, and they're using it here. And I was like, I'm on that because we didn't have $18 million to spend a ticket and fly out to Vegas. So I was like, I'm getting that. And that to me was super awesome. I loved it. And it should not be called Woodlands Jam. That's a geographical location. It just doesn't make any sense. So
Josh, your thoughts on the yet to be determined official name secret set?
Well, I'll say two things first, just to piggyback off of what Skinny said. Number one, I wonder if that buck, because they've talked about, or when Trey talked about Ghosts of the Forest and going out with Seacott, like Ghosts of the Forest were these big bucks that they would hunt for. So I wonder if that's an interesting thing that you mentioned. I wonder if there's maybe some parallel there. The second point to piggyback off of is the Sphere. And not only do I think they used some of the visual lessons that they learned and incorporated into the Sphere shows, but they absolutely used some of the audio lessons that they learned from the Sphere, because the sound, basically wherever you were in that festival grounds, was completely dialed in. Like if you were back by the Ferris wheel, or you were back on the other side by City Hall, or like getting a drink, or like back, or like with the Groove Safe and those stuff, where you could still hear like every single note from every member of the band. So I think that they learned something about how to, and that's got to be impossible to do in like an open air space, right? But they learned something about directional sound that I feel like they really incorporated. As far as the music, the It Tower Jam is probably my all-time favorite of the ambient, quote unquote, ambient sets. Musically, this is up there though, because they do start with that ambient trays like on an acoustic, and then all of a sudden 10 minutes later, 12 minutes later, he's now playing an electric, and they're like kind of deeper into a jam. But then they backed out of that at like maybe 35 minutes or so, went back to a little bit of an ambience, and then picked it back up. And so that ability to kind of weave in and out of the ambience and the jam stuff, and just like Skinny was talking about, like, you get the ambience is fun to hear, but it's soundscapes, like it's not like a groove that you can like sink into and kind of, dance to. We're dancers, and it's cool to stand there and bob your head, but the way they balanced that out, I thought was very well done. And I think a lot of the visuals were super cool, being projected onto the curtain that they were playing behind, like the tower that they played on, or the flatbed truck that they played on, were behind a drive-in movie theater at Magnaball, or inside a storage shed. So this whole naming thing, I got into it a little bit with Charlie Dirksen from .net about it, and then of course the coup de grace was when Phish said, "Oh, we're going to call it the Mondegreen secret set on the live Phish app." So, but no, I thought it was spectacular. The one thing that I did, if you want to call it a complaint, like the one thing that I think was cool about Magnaball and it and some of these other festivals, was there was a little bit of intrigue and mystery about where this thing was going to be, right? I mean, you found it out pretty easily. Like, we knew it was going to be where it was at Magnaball, and like we kind of lingered around. They kind of indicated by lighting that that part of the bleachers up. But I kind of like the idea of, like, you leave the concert park and, maybe there's a different spot that you might check something out, or they find a different spot within the concert park to to do this. So having it on the main stage for me was a little bit weird, just because of the nature of other secret sets that we've seen. But that didn't really take anything away from the quality of it. It was just a little bit weird, when Trey's like, all right, bro, don't leave because we're gonna play a secret set that is going to be secret, like that was a little bit, before it was like, oh, I remember when we were at it, like we're walking down the tarmac away from the tower, and then we kind of look back and it's like lit up in purple with smoke coming off. We're like, oh, maybe we should go back over there, and that, like, that piece of it, and maybe just because of the size of this thing and how spread out everybody was, maybe they didn't want to do it that way. But that would be my only, mild complaint about the secret set.
Scott,
can I piggyback off that? Yeah. And just to piggyback off that, we were convinced it was going to be at the heliograph. So we posted up in good position there, as did many people. But then I had to pee. And so I jotted off to the porta potty not to miss anything. And you want to talk about the sound being everywhere? I'm in, by the way, top-notch washroom facilities inside the venue.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Like they did a good job.
I never
speaking.
waited to take a piss.
Right? Exactly.
It was amazing.
So I get inside and I heard the music starting. They were pumping it into the porta potties perfectly. And so I hear, like, the ambient and the single strum acoustic guitar. And I'm like, are they starting? Am I starting the secret set in the pisser right now?
In your head?
Yeah. And in my head and in my state of mind. So, I needed to get back out there. And sure enough, that's what was happening. I think ambient jam is a bit of a misnomer. Having sat through the lemon wheel, we all made candles, and now literally we're going to lie in front of the stage, ambient jam, because by the time we got to the end of that jam, corresponding with the graphics too, there was a power, and, like, I wouldn't even call it, like, I just remember one part where, like, it was just so, it wasn't even a peak. It was just so powerful. And the band was pushing almost like from an orchestral sense, right? Everybody just kind of pushing all in the same direction, not listening, but pushing a sound and a mode forward to us. So I've really, by the time I made my way up close enough to sort of fully taken the scope of everything, it was maybe one of the more powerful of the secret sets that I've seen, like, just from a scope and spectacle. And as far as, like, the other thing I guess I would mention that it hasn't already been said is, I think the graphics guy was very clearly playing off the band, and the band was very clearly playing off the graphics guy. And I forget what the name of the company is that was in charge of all that, but clearly there was somebody with a dial who could kind of speed up the AI a little bit, slow down the AI a little bit, push an image this way, push an image that way. Like, it wasn't like the band had choreographed it. There was someone working with the band, and then subsequently you have to imagine, with the way it would have been projected for the band, that they also could have fed off of that in some way. And that was really tangible to me. Even, in the state that I was in, that it was all kind of all coming together and one big art piece. I really loved it.
What is that? The Monument Factory? Is that what it's called? I think.
Thank you.
Yes. The Moment
Correct.
Factory.
Moment Factory.
Yeah.
And they did all the graphics for
The New Year's stuff.
And the Sphere shows too, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Weren't they involved with that too? Yeah.
So just to wrap it up, you guys have pretty much nailed it. The only thing I'll say about the not so secret set is I agree, JW, with your kind of sense of it being a little off kilter with Trey announcing it from the stage, because everyone does say it's the secret set. When do you think the secret set's going to be? Where do you think? And the only thing that crossed my mind in that sense is, since they've never played a 4-night festival before, it's always been on Saturday night. So I guess there was that kind of confusion. And I did like how Trey, in his kind of impish personality, tried to cover for himself by saying, I'm just telling this guy up front. Right. You guys don't all have to listen. I'm just telling this guy. So I thought that was kind of cute. It kind of covered that up. But the end of the second set of the second night, I went back, starting in the encore, to meet up with a friend of mine who I've known since I've been 8 years old. And we see each other like once every 4 to 6 years, only at Phish shows. And we were both there. So I went back to hang with him. And then when Trey started making that announcement, we were hanging back by where the inflated eyeballs were in the
Yeah.
trees, kind of in
Yeah.
front of the
googly eyes.
the googly eyes, kind of
Yeah.
in front of the moon. And so we could still hear it perfectly clear. So we were just hanging out, catching up and hanging around. And then when that first part began, that was a lot of like synthesizers and overlapping kind of 80s new wave sounds. The first question kind of going around our group was, is that Phish? Are they playing? And we knew it was
Right.
the start of the set, but we were really asking, are the 4 band members on instruments? I was sure that they were, but now I don't think so when I listen back to it on soundboard. I think it was just like intro music.
Oh, interesting. Maybe.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, maybe.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe. It wasn't until I heard that first kind of pull of the
Right.
acoustic
Right.
that I knew that question was answered. But yeah, you
Right.
could be right. It could have been canned up
Right,
until a certain
because
point.
before the storage jam at Super Bowl, they had a bunch of speaker towers set up with like F1 or NASCAR
It was going
car sounds. So you didn't
Mhm.
so you didn't know where to go. You didn't know
Right.
where to go. So my instinct was this like synthesizer music for the first 10 minutes of this set was like a misdirection, because that would be very much in Phish's nature. Turned out was not the case. But I really enjoyed it, like especially once that first pull of the acoustic guitar started. It was really something else. It was obvious once the guitar kicked in, and it, I think, holds up to other secret sets. For a little while, I thought that David Gilmour was on stage. Just the tone of the guitar and the overall atmosphere of the music sounded very Pink Floyd to me. But in my opinion, it's the upper echelon of the best ones, like the It Tower Jam and the Storage Jam from Super Bowl. This one can get some easy press play, drive for 50 minutes, and really enjoy it in on a road trip. Easy.
I think in general this summer, Trey has found his Gilmore gear again. Haven't you found that there's a lot of very Gilmore-esque jams that he's leaning into a little bit? I'm finding that in his sound for sure.
So skipping ahead to night 3, let's see. My highlight, I could say the whole second set, but to me it was Down with Disease that stood out. Even in the moment, like everything just felt so locked in. And Trey has this habit his whole life, since I've been listening to Phish at least, where he'll find a really fun riff or a fun melody and he'll play it for like 12 seconds. And I hear myself saying, all right, keep it going, keep it going. And then right when it gets comfortable, switches gears, and then the band goes completely somewhere else. With this Down with Disease, it was like a masterclass in melody. And that's the kind of Phish that I really love. It was true jamming where one member gets a good idea, repeats it, the next band member joins in. And before you know it, everyone's jamming on this completely made up and improvised segment of music until everyone, crowd included, locks in, is going crazy, and then it's time to shift. So to me, this Down with Disease, I think, is 19 minutes or so. That happened several times during it. So for me, it was Down with Disease. Josh, what did you think? Night 3.
I would say probably the tweezer into Sense and Subtle Sounds was my highlight there. I mean, coming out of the Disease, the tweezer was what, 20 minutes or so.
All these songs were like 20 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, they really were. It was that stretched out feeling that I kind of talked about a little bit earlier, but there was just something about the way that Sense and Subtle Sounds flowed that it was just spectacular. I don't really, the Sense and Subtle Sounds, man, I would put that probably, that's going to be up there with like What's Going Through Your Mind. Like that is one of the peak things that they did this whole
It's going to be on your best of mix for Mondegreen.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Skinny, what about you? Night 3.
I was gonna say Sense and Subtle Sounds, and then Josh was like tweezer, and then I was like, ah, damn, don't take it. And then like I'm a big fan of Oblivion too, but it was a shorter jam of the night because I just like the way that song is constructed. But I'll go back to the tweezer and just say this: the last 6 minutes are type 2 again into type 3. They jump into this incredible, like funky, ridiculous jam after they've already peaked it like 3 times. And then they jump into this, and I'm like, oh, like you, Brian. Oh, okay. Do that for another 5. You don't have to go back into it. As a matter of fact, leave it unfinished. But they did finish it and then kind of into the sense. But that last 5 to 6 minutes, I guess I'll say, is like probably my favorite jam of the entire weekend, which is saying a lot because I love that sense.
And to wrap it up, we found out. I don't remember. I'm sorry, Scott. Go ahead. What's your Scott? What's your highlight?
I will keep it really brief because Down with Disease Tweezer, that's the musical highlight. Sense and Subtle Sounds played the role of what I wanted Beneath Sea of Stars to be this weekend. Just that sort of like transcendent, but that it was Sense made it even more special for me. But two nostalgia pieces that I pulled from Saturday night. The Whale is back in Jabu. I repeat.
Oh, yes, it is back.
It is back in Jabu. And that was like fucking time travel. Sorry, am I supposed
That's
to?
okay. Yeah,
You're
it's
allowed
say
to
whatever you
curse.
want.
It's
Curse
like
as
fucking
much as
time
you
travel,
fucking want, dude.
right? Like that pulls me right back, right? And the fact that it's been gone, and then that's got to be a conscious decision, was just that felt like a festival moment for me, and that was like a just pulled me into all the other festies that I've been at before. The other was the Boogie On as the choice of the dance out there, because I thought I was honestly go the rest of my Phish career without hearing another Boogie On ever again. And so when that hit, I didn't think I had anything left. No, sir. That was like, no, you see me, you hear me. Getting the Boogie On was like, I was thrilled. I was absolutely thrilled. So those are kind of my notes on, aside from obviously the brilliance of the DWD.
Yeah, who wasn't dancing during that Boogie On is the real question.
That was just, and that we all, like, again, there we were hitting like power note after power, and to hit that was just masterclass.
Everything was intentional. It's funny you mentioned that too. My wife is her two favorite songs are Weekapaw Groove and Boogie On, and she got the Mike's Groove in the first set, and then she gets the Boogie On, and I mean, it was the best. It was the best. Her first show, first festival, and she's getting it. It was awesome.
So before night 3, we all got a notification, whether in the Mondegreen app or an email, however we found out, is that there was a prediction, a forecast for nasty weather on Sunday. So what was supposed to be a typical show that would start around 7:15 or so, 7:30, it has been moved back to an afternoon set, a 1 o'clock start. So pretty insane that they changed it so drastically. A few thoughts I had is, number one, better than Curveball. Number two, it's amazing that Phish can hold a festival of this scale and this size and then have complete control over their set times. Because if it were a typical large scale festival like Firefly, where everything is scheduled to the minute, one adjustment to a band's set has a trickle down effect for the whole rest of the day that could kind of fuck everybody. So I thought the flexibility and the latitude that they had, if you can do this, why not? Because if you looked at the weather app, they made the right choice in the moment, if you looked at it at that time. For day 4, though, it was frustrating that the weather was just plain balls out hot as fuck, but we managed. And another story, it helped me kind of figure out my travel plans a little bit easier, but that's not here or now. But all that said, for day 4, I loved that the crowd was my highlight. There were people going around with the little fans, with the spritz, the water bottle fans, girls who were working near the lemonade stand coming out, just handing people giant blocks of ice to hold up to the back of their necks. That was super fun. And I also love the bathtub gin, because that's when I realized we're just going to get one long set, because at that point we were already at 90 minutes. It was a good bathtub gin, but I felt like day 4 was just gravy. It was all bonus. If the festival ended after night 3 and I had to go home, I would say I got my fill at the festival. But if I had to pick one by the construct of this podcast, I'll say bathtub gin.
Yeah, I didn't go. So we got screwed. And I think it was more my doing. I mean, I'll take complete blame for this, but at first 1 o'clock sounded wonderful. I was like, oh, okay. Well, we'll go over there. We'll go to the 1 o'clock set. And I'm thinking to myself, it's going to be one long one or 2 short sets and then that's a wrap. I would have rather that they did play at night because for all intents and purposes, the weather wound up working out for the evening, which they were worried about. But when we were at breakfast, by 1:00, it looked like radar. There was just a monsoon exactly right over top of the entire area. And so that kind of made our decision for us. And because we're an hour and 47 minutes door to door, I kind of called the ball. So we went back home. And when I started seeing the set list, I'm like, okay, because Amy was definitely concerned, like FOMO. And I understood that, as far as the festival is concerned. But I just felt like they kind of, I don't know what happened there. They kind of called that early. I really wish that they would have waited. I would have waited it out all day if they had played at night. It would have given us a chance to kind of maybe decompress and be ready for a night set and get out of there super early in the morning. But, it is what it is. You live by the seat of your pants. That's what happens.
Josh, did you stay for the Sunday show?
Yeah.
Okay. what was your
no,
favorite part
and
about it?
honestly, I say that in jest, and obviously, like, the turnaround from a Saturday night to a Sunday at 1:00 is, I mean, that's a quick turnaround. That's a quick turnaround, even with advance notice. Nonetheless, I absolutely love seeing Phish when the sun is out. So I was not in any way upset by the change. The only thing I was a little bit worried about was we were going to maybe get a little bit less music, because we weren't going to get, a 2-set show with, multi-song 30-minute encore. But it was what it was. And I mean, it was so hot. It was so fucking hot.
Yeah,
When
it
they
was.
started playing, like, I had already, like, drenched my, like, sweat through my shirt, through my plastic clear backpack. Like, it was ridiculously hot. But we were a little bit closer. We were able to slide up. So we were, like, right by the first set of speaker towers. So we had, like, a great view of the stage. And there's just something different about daytime Phish. And that was one of my, probably, if I had a complaint when they announced it, was that when they announced the set times, was that there was no 3-set day with an afternoon set and then a night show, which is what they had done at the last couple of festivals, where the Saturday was a 3-set day, really a 4-set with the secret set. But they played, at 3:00 and then, played for an hour and a half and then came back out at, 7:30. But being out in the field, and just like you said, with the people, the vibes, everybody was just having such an amazing time. And we caught Questlove before the first set. So that was cool.
Good.
That was
awesome.
awesome. So that was like a super cool intro to the day. Musically, I'm going to go with 3 covers. Timber. I love Timber because it was written by Josh White. I also love the song itself, but it was written by a blues guitarist named Josh White. The Isabella I thought was cool. And I know there were probably a lot of people that was their first Isabella and probably fucking lost their shit. And I mean, Trey playing those Jimi Hendrix guitar licks, like, everybody fucking loves that. I loved it. And then the Golden Age, I thought, was also very, I mean, that was a 15-minute Golden Age that I just felt like they kind of kept going. They hung on to it a little bit, had a really nice jam. The ending felt weird. I won't sugarcoat it. The ending, they played Fuego, which was a longer version of Fuego, and then they just stopped, and it just felt weird. And, like, they stopped playing, and, like, everybody kind of looked at each other, and it's like, what should we do now? Like, so that the ending was definitely weird. That, they play this one set, they play one encore, and then they're like, all right, thanks everybody. Which was unlike any festival ending. But I loved the daytime set. I don't think the gin was great. I don't think they really, did anything musically spectacular. They followed the same pattern that they had. They played a lot of songs in the 2 hours that they played. And, I mean, it was a fun way to close it, and like you said, Brian, it was really a little bit of a bonus because I mean, not financially, but in if you look at all of the past festivals, they were 3-day events, and so this was that kind of icing on the cake, if you will, because they did play on the third day, and I mean, they could have been like, the weather looks sketchy, we're just going to call it, and um so, and I understand like the weather situation, like, Christian and I live here in this area, and like there's a chance of thunderstorms every fucking day in the summer if you live in between Philly and DC. I mean, it's from, the inland to the coast, like there's a chance of storms every day. And I think I tweeted like, welcome to mid-Atlantic weather in the summer, and it never got, it never really materialized. I think it rained for a couple minutes, but like, you also have that gigantic fucking stage, which is like this gigantic sail. So if they had like any sort of big wins, like, I understand it, and they can't be responsible. They don't want to be responsible if, they do decide to go on and things go the other way.
Scott, take us home. What was your highlight of day 4?
Piggybacking on a couple of things Josh said really quickly, it is not a Phish festival until you get a hot ass afternoon set. It's not a Phish festival until you get a Yamar in the afternoon with everybody dancing around.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
felt
there you
the
go.
most.
That's good.
That felt the most festy to me. That's for sure. I was also happy to hear the timber because they teased it on night 1. I don't know if anybody caught that, but there was a little bit of timber teasing on night 1. So I'm glad they did get back to that because I wanted to hear that this weekend. I was one of those Isabella catchers, so that was cool for me
nice.
to pad the stats.
Fuck yeah.
And just to sort of reiterate, and maybe even present 2 things I was feeling overwhelmingly during the Simple and Golden Age, especially when the realization had kicked in. Overwhelming gratitude at that point. Like, you guys are doing the best with what you had. Yeah, we would all rather be hearing this Simple Golden Age at 9:00 as opposed to at 3:00, but here we are. So I had that gratitude moment. I also had an empathy moment where like I've performed, in the afternoon on a festival stage, not to that size, but like just where weather is involved. And there's a lot of running around backstage, a lot of people looking at their apps, a lot of people and as the musician up there, you're spending every 3 to 4 minutes kind of looking over your shoulder at the handlers. And so it really, that they even could perform alongside, you could tell Trey was frustrated. I mean, despite the fact that he made the absolutely catastrophic decision to wear a long sleeve black shirt.
It was like Jerry squared.
Well, talk about the Jerry vibes with like the pushing up the blackened sunglasses, like off the nose every once in a while. I was kind of like, ooh, that brought some very specific feels as well. But just I felt bad for them because they would have if they could have. You saw the 2 systems. It was a really interesting vibe afterwards. I really wish we got to hang out in the venue longer.
Yeah.
We tried. We, wandered around. We even like ordered some food. And then like when they decided it was done, like we were in Farmhouse getting pizza and like our slice hadn't been served yet. And they were like, you're not doing anything. And so we escaped with like somebody else's pizza because she was just like, well, they're not here. Here you go. And so it was abrupt and it was anticlimactic. But to your point, Brian, like the fact that they had that flexibility could do it, that it wasn't a washout. We got to be grateful for what we got, and what we got was pretty darn good.
Yeah, things could have been like gone completely south. They could have pulled the plug. Yeah,
it rained a little bit, and then there's this moment where the rainbow came out, and actually, like, there's a rainbow over the site. I would say 75% of the people left, either before, like, didn't attend Sunday. So don't feel bad, Skinny. Like, people like on either side of me in the campsite, they packed up Saturday night. They, got out of there. They were afraid, and rightly so. And then those of us were left. It was just kind of chill and reflective, and it made for a really easy leaving. Like, I was worried about getting home on Monday, right? Like, where everybody decides to get up and leave. How tight we were packed in GA, like camping. Like, I had a smaller vehicle, but there were trucks that you weren't going to go anywhere. And it was so nice just to kind of get up in the morning. I'd done most of my packing the night before. I just tore down the tent, and within 3 minutes I was on that strip you were talking about where like all the food was and a real bathroom and on the road, in good time. So in some ways, it was a bit of a saving grace for us that were camping.
Scott, when you were sorry, one last question. When it rained, like was it bad over like on site at all? Like it rained for like a couple seconds and then that was it, right?
So there was a
It was
big
windy, but
there was a big whoosh of wind that came through. And again, I'm like you guys, where I live just beside the Great Lakes, we were on thunderstorm warning constantly. We're
Sure.
always getting weather, any heat, chance of thunderstorm. So I knew when I felt that whoosh of wind, I'm like, oh, there's the cold air. There's the cold front. Here we go.
it's
And
coming.
I had friends that were in the GA South camping, but were that directly just as you walked outside of the venue where all the rickshaws were, there was a little bit of camping on that side.
Mhm.
So I just went and hung out with them for a little bit. And it like would rain for 5 minutes, then stop. Then it rained for 5 minutes and then stop. And then it was done.
Yeah.
That was it. That was it. But it could have, you saw those two red blobs on either side of us.
Yeah.
It split the difference. Somebody somewhere got a bad storm.
Yeah.
Well, to wrap it all up, gentlemen, real quick, reverse lightning round for attendance bias. Usually it's at the very beginning of the episode. Just going to ask you guys real quick fire questions. Scott, we'll start with you. What is one thing from this festival that you would keep and one thing you would change if Phish were to announce a festival next year? What would you keep? What would you change? One of each.
I would definitely keep sort of the spirit of having the installations being sort of spread out and around, and just again that variety. Keep giving us more visual stimuli as much as you could possibly give us. That is going to make the modern festival, and that's what people are going to come to expect. Thing that I might change, some stuff was clearly outsourced, and it has to be for something that size. But I think if they were to do it in Dover again, I think they are going to be much better prepared for who we are. Because I think there was a bit of a learning curve with the folks on site about who we were as a fan base and otherwise. But those would be my keep it and change it.
And would you keep it in the same location or would you move it? Would you go back to Dover or would you rather somewhere else?
Selfishly, yeah, of course, closer. I'd love to see different places, right? I'm never going to be able to do West Coast. I'm never really going to be able to do, Mexico until I'm done teaching. But I love new places. But I think if you did do it there again, it would be even more streamlined. So why not if it worked?
Josh, one thing you would keep, one thing you would change. And if they were to announce one for next year, would you like it to be in Dover or elsewhere? I think I know the answer to the second one.
Keep it in Dover, man. That was great. That Skinny and I have a little location bias there. But I think they did a really nice job just with the setup and the infrastructure. One thing I would keep, the actual festival ground setup. The one thing I was like, when I was looking at the map, I was like, there's this stand of trees right in the middle. Scott said earlier that the heliograph, like its location, like right dead center in front of the stage. I was a little bit like, that kind of takes away a big section of viewing, with that where that was. But I really liked the festival grounds setup, that it wasn't necessarily just like a football stadium or like the interior of a track setup like Magna was, where the stage was at one side, everything kind of was a ring around. Like there were definitely different segments and pockets of the concert grounds that people made their own. And Brian, you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but you were essentially in the same spot for 4 nights. We were in the same spot for 3 nights. Essentially, we slid up, I think, a little bit, right, Skinny, the second night, and then kind of hung out there. But like people kind of find their spots and then stay there for the duration. So that's what I loved about that setup, is there were some people that loved the trees. Like that was a great family section, right back in the trees. There was some shade back there in the googly forest. And so I just loved the setup. One thing that I would change is move the secret set off stage and have that experience where they're not playing in the traditional sense. They're not all standing in their usual positions on a stage, but you're seeing them in some other setting that is different and weird. They're playing in a storage shed, or they're playing on top of a control tower, or whatever it is. There was something that kind of made the secret set like a little less cool, I think, because of that. So those would be my two things. But absolutely, let's go back to Dover.
And Skinny, one thing you would change, one thing you would keep.
Well, the first thing I would change is the freaking prices. I mean, it's just out of control. You know what I mean? Like, and I hate to say
From your
that.
lips to God's ears, brother.
Yeah, and I know what it is. It's like these entertainment corporations and taxes, and like everybody's got to get paid. I thought I saw Tony Soprano walk by on fucking Saturday at set break. You know what I mean? Like everybody needs to get their palms greased. So, but just to make it more manageable, you know what I mean? Like $1 per ounce of beer is absolutely not inflation. That's gouging. So that's the one thing I would change. The one thing that I would keep, I like the location, but I will tell you that at that time of year, I wouldn't mind it going back to Watkins. It's not that far for us too.
Yeah.
And the weather is a little bit more applicable. I just remember the weather at Magnaball was some of the most magnificent weather.
It's glorious. It was.
It's higher elevation.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Just that kind of even if it's like warmer or during the day, even 90 at night, it breaks out and there's less
like
humidity.
60.
Yeah. And it's like, I like wearing a long sleeve or whatever at night and like, just being a little bit more comfortable. So if there was one thing to change, I would say, it was cool, but I wasn't like, oh man, this is so much better than anything I'd ever done. They could change the location back to Watkins, but I do understand climate change. So whatever. I know it's
Coming
an election
for us,
year.
no matter where
Sorry.
we are. Yeah.
I know it's ridiculous. So, but that's it. Yeah. Prices I would change.
My answers have already been said, all of them. So yeah, mine was going to be change the prices. And something I would keep the same is the variety and interactivity of all the cool art installations, because they really, for a festival that only has one band scheduled to play, there's no reason to be bored for the entire day.
Yeah.
And that really is a statement. And that's something to be proud of for Phish as an organization and for us as a fan base to step into the unknown, to allow ourselves to, whether we take a break from our phones and just like wander for a while, that takes up time and it's a lot of fun. And
we'll say one last thing, because I know Scott alluded to it a little bit earlier. Sorry, but the pods that they had spread throughout the campsites, I think, was really cool, and it was a very, very good way of engaging fan base groups, and I just thought that really shows a connection of the band and their organization and what they're trying to do with these things to the people that they're trying to do it for. And that, I think, I did the 5K on Friday and we ran through by a couple of the pods and they were all like just corners of activity, and the scheduling that they had, I just thought that was a really cool touch to get the fans really to be part of the planning of the festival outside of just the music and the art installations in it. And so I really thought that was a nice added touch that they had not had at any previous one.
That's a really good point. And I'm sorry that we didn't touch on it during the main part of our conversation. I agreed with you that it's taking advantage in a positive way of the Phish community and making it real and tangible in a place that's the most appropriate place for it to be available at a festival where we're all going to be. We could all snipe at each other online and support each other online. Now let's do it in person and within groups and names with which we're familiar. So guys, all four of us, the three of you, thank you so much for coming on today. Skinny and Josh of the Stub Me Down podcast. Scotty King, thank you for being a part of this and giving a fourth voice to this recap. Mondegreen was the best. I can't wait until they do it again, if they do it again. But I just want to say, if we're not taking up enough time already, there's time enough for another thank you and for an expression of gratitude to everybody who came, who I met. I'm sorry if I didn't meet you, but it was the greatest time no matter what.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us on, Brian. It was fun to talk about this, man. Definitely.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And yeah, love talking Phish anytime.
Yeah, man. Nice meeting you, Scotty.
Yeah, I will say the camaraderie of everybody, seeing you, Brian, running into the Wook Plus crew, everybody that we saw, like, the music is one thing, but the community and the camaraderie is a completely separate thing that comes together because of the music. And it was a spectacular event. And I was just so grateful to be a part. It's great to obviously see shows with Skinny. It was the only shows we saw this year together. So that kind of added a little bit of a special bonus. Both of our wives were at their first festival, so that was cool. So it was just an amazing event. And Brian, thanks for having us on. And Scott, we got to have you on Stub Me Down, bro.
And that's it for the Mondegreen recap with Skinny and JW from the Stub Me Down podcast, as well as Scott King. Next week, we'll be back to ordinary episodes of Attendance Bias. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you had a good time if you were at the festival, and looking forward to Dick's next week. Take care.